Welcome back to another screencast here with Mr. Schulte. Today we're taking a look at Chapter 6, Section 3, Big Business and Labor. As always, let's start and take a look at our learning objectives, things we want to be able to identify by the time you're done with this screencast. Number one, we're going to take a look at Andrew Carnegie's life and see how his management style and business strategies contributed to him being the most successful and wealthy person of the age. Next, we'll explain social Darwinism and how it's going to have an impact on society. Then we'll summarize the emergence and the growth of unions, and finally we'll take a look at the violent reaction that both government and industry are going to have to these unions coming about and using strikes. First, let's start off with Andrew Carnegie. A Scottish immigrant comes to America dirt poor, next to nothing, but through his own innate abilities, he's able to take advantage of the time period, adapt and change over time, kind of be forward thinking, and by the time he dies, he's the richest man not only in America but also in the world. And the key to his success is this idea of social Darwinism. You might be familiar with Charles Darwin, theory of evolution. We're going to take this theory and apply it to human beings as well. Now, the theory of evolution states those animals that are able to adapt and change to their environment are the ones that survive and they pass down their genes. And so as we look at that with humans, it's those individuals that have special innate abilities that can adapt and survive are going to be successful in life. Now, in looking at this, governments and also business people are going to use this philosophy of social Darwinism to discredit this idea that you need to help the poor or those that are less fortunate. This idea that if you're successful because of something you're doing, you're also going to be unsuccessful because of something that you did. And if you're not happy with your life, all you need to do is work a little harder, do better, and you'll be then successful. Definitely a model that Andrew Carnegie showed, as I said, came to America with nothing and then rose to the top through his own innate abilities, charm, characteristic, and really hard work. All right, the title of our chapter, our section here is Big Business. And so let's take a look at some of these big business practices that are going about in the late 1800s. Companies are starting to merge together and form one large company. So mergers are when companies buy out other companies to form a larger group. On the screen, you can see, I've taken this from Wikipedia, the top 10 biggest deals in the 2010s. And you might be familiar with some of these businesses like Dell, Heinz, AT&T, Verizon. All of those companies are buying smaller companies and they're making themselves much larger. They're enhancing their ability to then produce a product, whether that's quantity or variety as well. We have pools and trusts, and this is going to be a favorite of railroads during the time. If we're talking about big business in the late 1800s, you can't forget railroads. And so what would happen is railroads would work together to fix prices. So basically what they're doing is they're setting their prices at a higher rate than maybe they normally would, and they stop competing against each other. And they say, okay, let's set our railroad price at this, and if everybody follows it, there's no other alternative, and the people then have to pay it. And so in a sense, through mergers, trusts, and pools, we start to see businesses in the late 1800s start to form monopolies. And a monopoly, as you can see the definition in front of you, exclusive possession or control the supply or trade of a service or product. So what does that really mean? Monopolies are going to be when one business is essentially going to control the entire production or output of a product or a service. And there are different ways that monopolies can be formed, or different types of monopolies as well. We have mergers, trusts, pools, all kind of act like monopolies. But we'll take a look at some business practices that are going to be used as well to help form those monopolies. We have vertical integration and horizontal integration. Now sometimes you'll see this as vertical organization or horizontal organization, but whether you're using organization or integration, it's basically going to be the same thing. And so on the left, as we look at our vertical integration, think like your vertical jump, going up and down. This is owning all of the steps it takes to make a product. Our example here is with the meat industry, all the way from owning cows in Texas to the railroads that are going to ship them, the slaughterhouses that are going to produce them. That would be vertical integration. Horizontal integration is owning all of one step of making a product. People that we'll look at, on the left you see Andrew Carnegie again. He is going to take advantage of vertical integration, where he will own the ore, the railroads, the manufacturing plant, and then he'll sell from his plant to construction companies. And in owning all of those steps, he's able to maximize his profits. The gentleman on the right, this is J.D. Rockefeller. He's going to take the opposite approach, horizontal integration. Rockefeller is going to form a company known as Standard Oil, and they are going to, at one point in time, control 90% of all oil refined within the United States. Now, we said a monopoly controls all. Well, 90% is basically all. And so we can say J.D. Rockefeller is still going to have a monopoly on oil. He just does it horizontally. Another way to see that, dealing with our petroleum industry, the green vertical line, this would be vertical integration, owning all the different steps 1 through 5 of making and producing and selling oil, where J.D. Rockefeller is going to have just that step number 3. It's that processing, it's the refining of oil, and either way you can form a monopoly. I'd like you to pause and think here for a little bit. How and why are monopolies bad? Think about the consumer in particular. How are consumers hurt with the formation of monopolies? All right, our next question that we're going to take a look at is regulating big business. And what I want you to do for this is I want you to go back to your notes from our Age of Railroad screencast, or section 1 in chapter 6 of your book. And I want you to list the 3 attempts that were discussed trying to regulate the railroads. I want you to list them and then also write down how they tried to regulate the railroads, or the outcomes. What are things that they tried to prevent, or who had control over the railroads, or what limitations were placed on those railroads. In regulating big business, we're going to see another law is going to be put into place. We have the Grange laws, which are going to set maximum freight and passenger rates. We talked about Munn versus Illinois, which is going to give states the rights to regulate the railroads. And finally, we had the Interstate Commerce Act from last section, which allows the federal government to regulate the railroads. We're going to take it one more step here, and we're going to have the creation of the Sherman Antitrust Act. This is going to make it illegal to form trusts. And remember, a trust is just like a monopoly, and so illegal to form a monopoly that interferes with free trade between states or countries. Because most railroad lines are going to be moving, or most products are going to be sold from state to state, the government thought that this would give them the opportunity to regulate some of these railroads. However, for the most part, it's going to be unsuccessful. The term trust was loosely defined, and so companies reorganized, and so it didn't quite fit the definition that was written underneath the Sherman Antitrust Act. And then on top of that, we're going to see large businesses are going to use the Sherman Antitrust Act against workers. Workers who are going to be striking for better working conditions, higher pay, so on and so forth. Big businesses, once these strikes go on, are going to turn to the government and say, hey, this is hurting interstate commerce. This is going to hurt, free trade between states. And so oftentimes the government would then send in troops to support the businesses and force these workers to go back to work. And so this, much like those other attempts to regulate the railroad, is also going to be ineffective. And so why are workers striking? Let's take a look at what people are having to deal with in the late 1800s. You can see long hours, long work days. 12 to 14-hour work days are going to be pretty typical, and we can thank Thomas Edison and the light bulb for that. Right, one of those unforeseen consequences that's going to arise. Now we can work around the clock, and so people are then going to work even when it's dark out. Many companies are going to require people to work 6 or 7 days a week. Conditions are going to be pretty unsafe. In 1880s, we're looking at almost 700 people a week are going to be killed, not hurt, but killed in factories across the United States. Other things that workers are going to be struggling with is the things that they don't have. They don't have vacation days. They don't have sick days, and if they are injured, which happen frequently in these unsafe working conditions, there's no compensation. So once they're hurt, they're just hurt, and they have to deal with that the rest of their life. Or if they're out for work, they just kind of have to survive. And then on top of all that, we have child labor is going to be pretty prevalent at this time, because you can pay a kid a whole lot less than you can pay a man or even a woman at this time. Children are also going to be targeted in certain industries because of their size. They're small and they can fit into tight spaces. They have tiny fingers, and so they can work easier with small pieces. Maybe your dad has like fat sausage fingers like my dad does, and I always laugh whenever he tries to use his phone because he's pressing like 3 buttons at once. Right? Imagine guys back in the day with these really thick hands trying to work with small, delicate little pieces. It's not going to be very successful. And so little kids with their small hands are perfect for that. And kids as young as the age of 5 can have full-time jobs. And families are going to be forced, as we look at annual incomes here, families are going to be forced to have their kids working because they need it to survive. They're not making enough that they can afford to put their kids into school where they need that extra income just to survive and live. And so let's take a look at some of these working conditions, and we'll focus on kids here, but you can say this is definitely going to be true of adults as well. You see children missing arms, kids in the middle, I would say they're probably right around age 13, 14. Those kids are working in the mines. If you look closely at the top left picture, two things should stand out to you. Number one, the kid has no shoes, and then if you look at the kid in the background, he must have like a toothache or something, and he's got this bandage wrapped around his head. Annual incomes you can see here, men making less than $500 a year, women almost half that. And at the same time, and this kind of ties in that idea of social Darwinism, Andrew Carnegie, this guy who took advantage of his opportunities and made the most of life, is making $23 million at the same time. To put this into perspective, they said milk delivered to your door in a half gallon is about 5 cents. Children could be working for 27 cents for 12 to 14 hours a day. Up next we have unions. I'd like you to Google it or ask an adult. I want you to think, what are unions and what is their purpose? Some union terms we want to be familiar with are listed here. A strike. This is often used by workers who are protesting some form of discontent with their worker, whether that's pay, whether that's hours, working conditions. All those things would be reasons for workers to go on strike, and so they stop working. The idea behind that is if we stop working, the company produces zero product, and you hurt them economically. Next term, we have a scab. A scab is going to be somebody who, once striking workers have stepped off the job, they're the replacement. They're the people that are coming in to work while the strikers are striking, and oftentimes they're paid even less than the striking workers. Collective bargaining. Now this is something that the unions use as a way of improving wages and other conditions. And finally we have arbitration. Arbitration is when the two sides, employer-employee, can't come to solid ground, and so they hire an arbitrator, and they both present their case to the arbitrator. The arbitrator hears both sides, and he rules not what's in the middle, what's fair, but he chooses one side over the other. And sometimes this is a tactic used by various labor unions. Let's talk about a couple of these unions you're going to want to know. We have the Industrial Workers of the World, also known as the IWW or the Wobblies. This group is led by Eugene V. Debs, the same gentleman that helped lead the American Railway Union and those striking workers at Pullman. And this is a social group, or a socialism group. They wanted everybody in America to join this one big union. Skilled, unskilled, men, women, children, African Americans, whites, Hispanics, immigrants of all sorts, to join this group, to band together. So it's really workers against employers. We'll see that socialism in America is one of those dirty words that you don't really like to say, much like communism, and so a lot of negative connotations are going to be viewed with the Wobblies here. Our next group would be the Knights of Labor, led by Terence Powderly, and they're open to all people. So this is skilled or unskilled labor as well. You can see they're fighting for an 8-hour workday is one of the things they really pushed, and they favored arbitration instead of going on strike. They thought that would give them a better opportunity in management's eyes, that they'd be more willing to maybe cater or have unbiased third party listen and then rule in their favor. Once all the facts are then listed of, hey, these are the conditions, here are the struggles that we're going through. And you want to know the difference between the Knights of Labor and the American Federation of Labor. The AFL, led by Samuel Gompers, is going to have only skilled workers. And so what's the difference between skilled and unskilled workers? Well, skilled workers are going to have some sort of education or training. It's a job that not everyone can do. Unskilled workers would be typical manual labor, swinging a hammer, lifting this, putting this box there, whatever it's going to be. So that's unskilled. Anybody could do it. Skilled labor, you have a trade, you have a skill that not everyone does. And so they're banding together just the skilled workers here. And they are in favor of using that collective bargaining to get higher wages. And they're also in favor of using strikes to get what they want. And you can see during the late 1800s, growth of union membership is on the rise until we get to the Haymarket Square incident or the Haymarket riot. What happened at Haymarket Square is days prior to this event, there was a strike at the McCormick reaping plant, and workers got into conflict with police, and 6 people ended up being killed by the police. And so they held this rally at the Haymarket Square as kind of a, solidarity standing up against the man. And you can see the flyer over here on the right, calling working men to arms to stand up and to show them that we're not going to take this anymore from the rich. As we see a little bit of that class division starting to come up. And at this rally at Haymarket Square, somebody brought their arms. Somebody brought a bomb, and they tossed it into a crowd of police officers, and it exploded, killing police officers, and the police opened fire and killed some of the people that were at this event. The leaders ended up being rounded up, and they were executed. And as a result of that, unions are going to be seen as pretty hostile, and union membership is then going to decline, as you can see for the next and union membership is going to decline for the next couple of years here. Now eventually it will pick back up as we get closer to the 1900s, and that's thanks to people like Mary Harris Jones, or Mother Mary as people often refer to her at. Not only is it important to know Mary Jones as a union organizer, but she's a female union organizer. She took care of the United Mine Workers, she protested with them, she spent time in jail with these people as they were arrested by the police for protesting. And in the early 1900s, she's going to lead a group of young children to Washington to talk to President Roosevelt, and really is going to be kind of the kickstarter behind getting some of these reforms rolling into place during this progressive era. And in class, we're going to take a look at the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire. This one event we'll see is going to cause a lot of major changes in workplace reform. Finally, what I want you to do is to take a look at the screen. Look at our learning objectives and see what you know, see what you don't. And if you're unsure or confused about some of these, make sure you bring those questions to class next time.